All right, we are live. We're live on Facebook and we're live on YouTube. And I'm super thankful to be sitting here for episode 52 with my gosh. Now, I don't even want to do the math on it, Pratter, but however many years ago we were actually teammates in Sherwood Park. But that's where you and I first came across the Sherwood Park Flyers as Bantams. And now you're all the way Stanley Cup champion and assistant coach of the Colorado Avalanche. And just wanted to thank you for joining us here today on Up My Hockey.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you having me. I think we're pushing right around 30 years, I think, since we last played together. So played against each other plenty throughout the years, but I'm excited to have a chat with you.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, you know what? And now the math wasn't that hard because it was 1990. It was a 1991 season in Sherwood Park because I was 14. I just remember that because it was such a big, not only was that a big move for me for a lot of personal levels, but what was super crystallizing for me was that 14 years old in Alberta and I was allowed to drive a car. So
Yeah.
which we could not do in BC. So me making that move across the border, I remember I was 14 and I could drive a car and this was big time. So I totally remember. And that was obviously put me at 1990. So 30 years, man. Holy smokes. Coming up on 31. That is wild. I want to touch on that actually, because coaches, when they get into the positions that they're in right now, sometimes their playing career gets forgotten about, and especially for the players that are playing underneath you right now, they don't probably know what type of player you were or do much research on what you were all about. And I think that's an interesting place to go revisit, because there are a lot of listeners here on Up My Hockey that are going through this minor hockey process right now. And there's a lot of parents wondering about, what's the right route to go and the right thing for my kid. And everyone has such a different path, as you know, and you and I are no exception. I mean, your path and my path were quite different, and they ended up in different spots. But what type of taking us back to Sherwood Park and even maybe before that Bantam Flyers team, but what type of a player were you in minor hockey, and when did you have the aspirations of maybe turning this into a job for yourself at one day?
Geez, it's a tough question, because you look back and you look at that team and keep in mind, I think I moved to Sherwood Park maybe 1 year before you, and my family picked Sherwood Park for their youth hockey program. So, it was part of the move for us. But so you come in there, and I came from small town Fort McMurray and maybe kind of thought I was hot stuff there, and then you get to Edmonton and it's like, whoa, everyone's pretty good here. So as a young kid, I thought I was Paul Coffey, and that's who I wanted to be as a kid. And sorry about that. I apologize. So it was, that's how my career as a young kid, that's what I thought I was going to be. I thought I was going to be Paul Coffey, and everyone had big dreams. And the reality of it is it wasn't very close. So completely different path as a player and probably skill set. And obviously everyone that remembers Paul knows his skating ability and his offensive talent that he had. I didn't have that, so I had to find another way to make it. Now, it was always a dream of mine. And I think a lot of people can always say that they, I want to play in the NHL. My dream's to play in the NHL. And to be honest with you, when I was 14, 15, 16, I really started to, really think that it's something that I could do. And that seems awfully young, obviously, but, you go on from there, and I don't want to jump too far ahead, but then you get drafted and all of a sudden the team's not going to sign you, sort of thing. So, it's a long process, and there's a lot of hours and a lot of work, and don't forget that more than anything, a lot of fun that has to go along with it to have that success. So I'll kind of give you a roundabout answer there for you.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, I appreciate it. No, where I was kind of going at it was sometimes it's easy to project the spotlight on the star at that age, or the stars, right? Our team had quite a few stars, that Bantam Flyer team. And just for those listening, I've never done the research on it, nor do I know this conclusively, but I honestly think it might be one of the best Bantam teams to ever be assembled. That's just from not an all-star scenario, just from a local association. We ended up having, I think 14 of our players ended up being listed to WHL teams. Almost that many went on to play in the WHL. We had 6 or 7 guys drafted to the NHL. Yeah. I think 5 or 6 of us played in the NHL. That's crazy from a small town association. So, our team was was pretty hot, and our numbers showed it with our win-loss column. But in saying that, you know, I mean, and you were a hell of a player, don't get me wrong, but you weren't necessarily a star in that league or on that team, you know. And can you talk us through that, if you agree with me, you know what I mean, on where you kind of like your place there, and then how that grew into somebody that you had a belief system that you could, you know, you could one day make it to the NHL?
Yeah, I don't think I ever, you know, I never thought of myself in that light anyhow. Like I never thought I was a star. I felt like I was a good hockey player, but when you look at the team that we had there, and yourself included, but we had the Langkow brothers and, you know, first round picks, second round picks. Brad Symes was a third round pick, I think. And I mean, this is a couple of years down the road, but it kind of gives you an idea of the talent that was there. And not only that, the NHL talent, but the talent that went on to have really successful and careers at the WHL level as well. So, you know, I just was sort of, you know, I think the biggest thing for me is I had so much fun playing, and the year prior to that, I played bantam single A in Sherwood Park, and it was one of the most fun years I had playing hockey in my career. And I'll always go back to that group of guys that I played with there, and it was my first year in Sherwood Park, and so, you know, I just always wanted to play the game. I loved being around the arena. I loved being at practice, and obviously thrilled to play games. And I think that is something that, you know, the love for the game has always been with me. And I've always kind of had a little chip on my shoulder that if someone told me that, hey, you're not good enough or you can't do it, which happened to me kind of repeatedly throughout my junior career and even into pro, I just took it as a challenge. Even as a young kid, I wanted to sort of be, you know, no, you can't tell me I can't play on the Sherwood Park Flyers. Like that was my goal, and I was going to do it. And so mindset from a young age. And I know most 14-year-olds, I'm not saying that I was sitting there, you know, had it all figured out at 14, because I certainly didn't. But I just, you know, enjoyed the game and always wanted to prove people sort of wrong that, you know, I'll be okay. So.
Right. Yeah, you mentioned the rounds there. I mean, I never really thought of it that way. But yeah, Lanks was like top 10 first rounder. His brother was a second rounder. I was a second rounder. Simesy was a third rounder. Mike Dubinsky was a third rounder. Yourself was a fifth rounder. I mean, this is to the NHL draft from a bantam team.
Yeah.
Like that's crazy.
It's incredible. Yeah, it really is. Yeah.
I remember rolling in. It's funny you guys did that too. So you came from Fort Mac, kind of chasing your hockey dreams, which is an amazing commitment from a family. And you know, my mom and dad did the exact same thing, and maybe even to the nth level, being that like my dad had his work in Vernon and couldn't leave. My mom came with me to Sherwood Park, and like dad would drive back and forth on the weekends to like, you know, see his family, and we made that move strictly for hockey. And I remember like the first weekend of tryouts, because you know, like you said, you came from Fort McMurray, smaller town. I came from Vernon, smaller town. Kind of lit up BC as a peewee, right? And then came into to Sherwood Park and was like, I mean, I knew it was going to be a good team, but I remember leaving that ice the first weekend, and I said to my dad, I'm like, I don't think I'm going to make this team. Like that's how good everyone felt, right? I was like, holy smokes! Like here we are in Alberta, I might not even make the team. Anyways, obviously we didn't end the way we wanted, but that year was a heck of a lot of fun too. Success always, you know, leads fond memories, and I know you experienced that now as a player and as a coach with your championships. But when did you? I'm going to take it back to you saying people told you that you weren't good enough. Like when did you first experience that, or what's your first memory of someone telling you that?
Well, I think my first year in Sherwood Park, you know, my sort of age group and sort of peers that I was going to school with were all ended up on the AA or AAA team there in Sherwood Park, and you know, I was cut from AAA, cut from AA, and ended up on the single A team, and you know, that was the first time I was 14 that I'd ever actually been cut from a team. Now, like you just touched on and alluded to, it's small, right? So coming from Fort McMurray, we didn't have so many teams, and we didn't have the talent pool that the bigger cities had. But so that was my first time that I was ever cut, and it hit me hard initially. You know, I was kind of like, whoa, hang on, I thought I'd be here, and then it turned out a lot of my friends were kind of on these other teams initially, and obviously made some great friends there on the other team. So that was the first time, you know, and then I was cut from the Sherwood Park Crusaders, and I was on the way of getting cut from the midget chain. I don't know what they call that team now, but the chain gang in Sherwood Park, and ended up playing Tier 2 junior, after being cut from Portland Winterhawks prior to that. So it was, it happens, and there's stumbles along the way for everybody, but it never really deterred me. I just kind of always thought I'd figure it out along the way.
Well, I think you already answered the question of how you become resilient and resilient and persevere, and that's having a love for the game, right? Like everyone that I've talked to on this show, we're 52 episodes in now. Like the stories are phenomenal, the resilience. Like Kevin Sawyer always comes to mind for me, like cut from 3 different junior A teams at 18 years old. Like his NHL draft year, he couldn't find a place to play junior A hockey, not even the WHL, but he just wanted to play, and he just wanted to play. And then he showed up, and he ends up making the Spokane Chiefs. And then 2 years later, he signs an NHL deal, and he's got an NHL jersey on. Like, a lot of guys would have quit if you didn't love it. You wouldn't have, stayed with it, right? I know your story isn't to that extreme, but you got to love it, right? To go through some of those bumps.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think, everyone has their own path, and I know it's easy. I find, like, I've got a younger daughter that's going to university next year. She plays field hockey, and it's kind of a little bit of the same. She was, told that she probably should not maybe set her sights on Division I field hockey, and so she's kind of carried that sort of little chip to prove people wrong as well. But my point with it all is there's so many different paths, and I feel like I'm in it now with my kids in youth sports and high school sports, middle school sports, and everyone's got to do this. You got to do it this way. You got to do it this way. You got to don't miss this. You got to make sure you're here for that. And there's so many different paths you take, and everyone develops at their own pace. And the biggest thing for me is just truly enjoying what you're doing. If you're not, it's probably not going to last for you. So that'd be the biggest thing for me, is that, my parents supported me. They never drove me to a point where I felt like it was a work for me or I was doing it for somebody else. It was always, they provided me the opportunity to have fun and enjoy the game. And I think that's probably a big part of my lasting NHL career as a player and as a coach.
There's an interesting point. Maybe we'll just touch on it for a second, because you are a father now yourself of aspiring athletes, and the debate or the discussion will continue, and maybe more so now, but about like what is too much and what is not enough, and how much should parents be involved in that process with their athlete. Has that been a balance that you've tried to find one way or the other with your daughters?
I think so. I coach professional, so I have a habit of wanting to push guys or be as honest as you can with your players and critique things. And I have to catch myself with my kids to make sure that I'm a father too at the same time. And, I think there is a fine line. And I think, I've always tried to just sit back and watch and enjoy the moments of being a parent, and enjoy the moments of watching my kids compete or play or practice or whatever it is. And, I've always, and I'm not saying that I haven't probably crossed the line a few times, because everybody wants the best for your kids, and you try to find a way to help and push them into certain areas. But, the perfect example would be my daughter swam. She was a swimmer and quite good. When we were living in Massachusetts, I think she finished third in state finals in breaststroke one year, and she was good. And my family has a whole history of swimming. My nieces and nephews, my brother and his wife, and they're swimming at the international level as well. And so I kind of was trying to get her into swimming, but there was always this hint of it wasn't what she really loved, and I could feel it. And it took a while until, she was playing field hockey and swimming at the same time. And what was happening is she was kind of dividing her time on both, and just sort of doing okay at either one, but not really, like, I could tell that she didn't love the swimming. And so we had a conversation. I said, I just want you to pick what you want to do and have fun. And it wasn't it was shortly after that she decided against swimming and invested her time in what she really loved, was field hockey. And It's a long-winded answer for you here. I apologize, but I let her make the choice, and it wasn't until she was, she just turned 14 and she was going to be turning 15 that she made a choice for herself on what she really wanted to do, and it could have been neither for all I cared, as long as she was happy doing it, and so I think kids eventually will make that decision on their own on how hard they're willing to push or how hard they want to go in their individual sport.
Do you think it's relevant as far as what their goals and dreams are, and then trying to be honest with what that might look like? I mean, what I mean by that is you've already mentioned it. So you're coaching at the best league in the world. So you see the best hockey players in the world come through your doors. You've been a part of that as a player. You've been around the likes of the Forsbergs and the Martin St. Louis of the world, and you've seen like this otherworldly attention to detail and the pursuit of excellence that most people don't get that firsthand look to. And now you're, like you said, now you got your parent hat on and you're listening to your daughter say, yeah, I want to do this. Like, is that something that you want to expose her to or let her know, like that there is these different places to get to, or do you just kind of let her figure that out for herself?
No, I talk to her a lot about it, and I try to do it in I don't want to say a gentle manner, but I try to be careful with my words with her, because Division I athletics is it's tough, and it's going to be a lot of work for her to not only get on the field but gain playing time and build trust with coaches, and it's every year they're bringing in new kids to kind of take your spot. So we certainly have conversations, and I'm not going to lie to you, we were at the track yesterday. So I'm not sitting here saying I don't try to help, give her a little bit of sort of what I went through. And, because it is, obviously the higher you go on every level, obviously it's a step up, and it kind of, everyone, chooses sort of, if you want to play house league hockey or single A or double A or triple A or these elite travel teams that you see all across Canada now. And, you find your niche there and where you want to play and where you're happy playing. But every level you go up, it kind of weeds out sort of a certain level of player, and you try to prepare them and let them know that, hey, I know you're good here and you're working hard, but these kids are working this hard, and you're going to have to work that hard to have success at the college level. So certainly conversations we have, and they are, I try to be as honest with her as I can, because I have the background to have kind of gone through some of those things. So
yeah, I know for sure you have. And I think those are honest conversations. That's something that I like to do with the athletes I work with too, is like, again, try to the best we can align their habits and their actions with their goals and dreams, right? So, I mean, if you're going to tell me you want to be something, right, I 100% want to support you in that, whether that's my kid or somebody that I'm working with, right? But there is an honesty there, because I think sometimes in some households, it's like, yeah, you can do whatever you want. And I mean, that's great, but that's empty, I think, in a lot of ways, right? Because you can, but there's actions that are going to be necessary for that to happen, and I think they need to know that.
Yeah, and I think, I didn't mean to jump in there, but really well said when you started off there, because it is true. Like, I think, parents always believe that their kids are great, right? Everyone thinks their kids are fantastic, and if you got to take that parent lens off sometimes and have, depending on what the goals are for the individual, and I know we're talking about 14, 15-year-old kids, but there's work that comes with wanting to advance in anything, let alone sports. So yeah. I really liked what you said there. So.
And there is a leveling up process, as you said, even at 14, 15, obviously Martin St. Louis wasn't who he was at 25 when he was 15. I mean, he grew into those habits, and he grew into that mindset and that philosophy, right? So obviously we're not trying to pretend that's what it's supposed to be, but there is, I think one of the most interesting things for me personally throughout my hockey career was being exposed to the different standards that do exist within the sport. Sure. Because you don't know what you don't know. And I've said that time and time again, like, until you've seen it, until you've witnessed it, or until you've partaked in it, it's really hard to like even fathom that some guys do go to that level with their craft and with their approach. Right. And once you do see it, it's a massive eye opener, because now you have a choice. Okay, this is how some guys do it. Maybe I should get on board. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and a lot of times, and I was lucky enough when I was young in my career to be surrounded by some people like Glenn Wesley, Gary Roberts, Paul Coffey, Keith Primo. That was the early stages of my NHL career, and I can remember them being like, "Hey, listen, you got to start taking care of your body a little bit more here," and they're like sending me to expert trainers to work with so that I can, not just help myself, but help them. And so you don't, like you said, you don't know what you don't know. It's, there's a lot of work that goes involved with it, obviously.
Is that part of something that you do now in your role? I mean, not, I still want to get back to you as a career, but I mean, these conversations go where they go. And that idea of like, now you have a Bowen Byram, and maybe we don't have to talk about Bowen, but obviously amazingly talented kid. We watched him play World Junior and his progression, high draft pick. A lot of these players that come up, these youthful players that are high skill, high talent level, sometimes haven't figured out what it means to be a pro or a professional, and like what that kind of takes on the night in and night out basis. Is that left on your shoulders some points? Is that left on the shoulders of the veterans within the team, or like how does that message get communicated?
I think it's probably a little bit of both. I think we are the timing of our organization now and where we're at as a team, and our goals and expectations from management, coaching staff to the players is they're pushing that message now, and that's happened kind of a couple of years ago for us, probably 3 years ago, where there was sort of a little bit of a rollover from our my first year here, which was a really tough year, and we ended up dead last in the league, but our players are sort of driving that message. We've got guys like Gabriel Landeskog and Nathan McKinnon that when you watch these guys train and prepare, and you watch the way Cale Makar practices, and it's hard to not get on board with that so you need to, and some of that message will come from the head coach Jared, who I know you talked to just a while ago, and but there's a whole group of people that are all pushing to help develop these guys and these young players, and whether it's our development staff, our American League staff, us as coaches here in Denver, or our management. So there's a lot of people trying to help them identify sort of where they need to improve and how they need to get better to have successful NHL careers.
Yeah, one of your old colleagues there, and I'm sure still a current friend, Brad Larson, had a chat with him, and he essentially described, when you get that culture right, which is what you're speaking to, is a younger player or anyone, Jason Panolan, could walk into that environment or that practice, and no one would have to say a word to me, but I would just know what this place is about. By how people are acting, how people are going about their business. And it sounds like you guys are starting, or you have that there in Colorado now. So that must be pretty exciting.
Yeah, no, it's great. And I think that's ultimately what you're striving for as a coach or coaching staff, is to create a winning culture. And there's certainly a lot that goes into it. It's not necessarily about the wins, but, the process of getting there.
Right. I have a listener from Nova Scotia, and he says, I got a question. How is special is Nate McKinnon? He's from here in Cole Harbour, Nova Scotia, and we're all in awe of how incredible he's playing right now. He's obviously super special, like a generational type talent. And it just seems like a couple of years ago in the playoffs there, when he stepped out, at least for me, it seemed like that was his like real arrival of like, I'm this good and I'm this good and I'm going to be this good all the time. What has it been like to watch his evolution as a player?
Yeah, he's a treat. And I'll be honest with you, sometimes I'm in awe watching him, some of the things that he can do. And, but this kid he's an incredibly hard worker. His attention to detail and in his routine and his sort of body of work that he has throughout the season, he doesn't let much slip by him. So he's an incredible talent, obviously, but I think the work ethic that goes along with it, and to get him into those areas and to the peak condition that he's in, and he's a special player. He's a special talent, and he's really fun to be around and watch play.
That's interesting that you say that, because I like hearing those stories, just that make some of these superstar type players, that these kids are idolizing, when we can take them off the pedestal just a little bit, because you're talking about what he does away from the rink that makes him real special too. Like, he's obviously got a toolkit beyond, right? But like, he's combining that now with a professionalism and a workmanlike approach to his business that is allowing him to take those next steps. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it humanizes him, in my opinion, because he's working hard at it. It's not just all natural.
Yeah. I think, in my time here, and I can't speak certainly before, but in the 4 years, and this is my 5th year here, we've seen a huge growth in those areas for him. And that might not be fair for me to say, but I've just seen a player that's just continued to elevate his game here year in, year out. And I have to think that a lot of that has to do with his mindset and his training and his diet. All of those things are what make him really special on the ice. I had the pleasure of interviewing David Quinn a little while ago, and one of the ways he talked about some of these players that seem to get it, or the types of players that he wants in his room are the guys, he said, that are going to help you outside of the 60 minutes of the game, and they're going to help you for the 23 other hours in the day. Is that a good way to describe kind of maybe where Nathan has been able to grow his game, like in the areas outside of the game itself? Yeah, I think he's taken on, this is within the game, but when, a leadership role within our team, so which takes on a lot more than the game itself. And we're lucky with the group that we have, and Gabe Landeskog does an incredible job of that as well. And so all of these guys have sort of dialed their games in here the last couple of years, and all taken steps and with goals in mind, individually and as a team. And but they've all matured as we've moved on here the last few years, quite a bit.
Yeah, it's fun to watch your team. It's one of my favorite teams to watch now, I guess, for obvious reasons. I mean, when I appreciate who's standing behind the bench and have relationships with you and Bedsy, but it's also amazing to watch your team grow and come together, and the individual athletes within that team. Like, there's so much fun to watch when you guys are out there. So it's really cool to see that evolution. Let's hop back to Portland. I mean, talk about your junior days just a little bit, because we haven't touched on that yet. I mean, you had some really good hockey teams there. Maybe could have done better than you did from a playoff standpoint, but a lot of names, a lot of big names, a lot of tough bodies, and a lot of guys that went on to do some cool things in pro. What was your time like there in Portland?
Portland was fantastic. I have nothing but the most fond memories of playing there. And again, everything is a little bit better when you win. And we, like you just touched on, we had some really good teams, and I agree with you. Probably could have done a little bit more there in my early years. But, the one year we went to the finals there and lost to Swift Current in 7 games. And I think we were
So I want to jump in there. Was that the year you guys had, I think it was 6 guys score 40 goals or something? Like, there was one year there that it was crazy, the amount of offense you had on that team.
Yeah. We had a couple of years there where we were we had Deadmarsh and Weimer and Brad Isbister, Dave Scatchard. We had
Bohannes,
Bohannes was there. Yeah, Colin Foley. We had an incredible team. Scott Nickel was another one. So I can't remember exactly which year it is, but the year we lost, I think we were up 3-1 in the series in the final, and we ended up losing in 7, and which was unfortunate. But they had some pretty good players. They had Dean McCammond was there, Brent Bilodeau, I believe Tyler Wright. He might have been gone that year, but they were some good hockey players too. So, but I had a lot of fun. I really was, like I said, my year as a Bantam A was one of my most fond memories, and then my years in junior it was an incredible amount of fun there as a teenager.
Yeah, I mean, I don't talk to many guys from that time that look back on it not fondly. I mean, I've had that discussion here before, and I mean, you, I guess, as far as an NHL career is concerned, it wasn't like you were a Ray Bourque that was able to stay in one place for essentially ever, but you had long runs, in your NHL journey, so you're able to feel like you had a home, and I think a sense of place. That was, for me in my hockey journey, that was really the only time I felt that was in Spokane. I was there for 4 years. I knew where I was going. I never got traded. I was able to be, grow within that organization and the culture. And then once I turned pro, I was just all over the place. And I really never felt like I had a home. So for me, Spokane is one of the fondest memories ever. I mean, those teams and the players and everything about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And lasting, some of my best friends to this day are still, guys that I played junior with. And um, so it was a great experience. So.
What about your let's get through camp because that's always a big thing. You mean like whether it's your first camp or like that process of getting drafted, going to this NHL camp, that experience, being around these pros, guys you've watched on TV, had their hockey cards, posters up on your wall of them, and now you're supposed to be one of them. How did that process go, and what are your recollections of your first or second camps?
Oh, my first camp, I think I was terrified, to be honest with you. I remember walking in there and keep in mind, maybe you go back to, early 90s, there's some men in those rooms, like there wasn't unheard of to have 33, 34, 35-year-old men. And I can remember sitting there and not that there isn't today, but it's certainly gotten younger over the years. And you walk in as an 18-year-old and there's, our team's littered with 20 to 24-year-olds that are a huge part of our lineup. So I can remember walking in there and just sort of just in awe, really, to be honest with you. And, I thought I was in good shape, but after I went through the testing, I realized I wasn't really in that good a shape. And there's a long ways to go, not just to play in the NHL, but just, whether or not it was the American League or not. And the American League was certainly a little bit older too than it is now to these days because it's such a developmental league. It always has been, but it's gotten younger and younger as well. Mm-hmm. So I can remember walking in there and I think they back in those days they had some the rookie games where they would take, say we'd go play the Baby Bruins or the Montreal Canadiens, and they were some tough games, and there was a lot of stuff that got sorted out on the ice that I don't know how I survived in my early days, but I figured out a way anyway. So,
yeah, I mean, it's an interesting point that you make because I definitely, without question, the league's gotten younger. I'd like to see an actual data graph sheet of what that actually looks like. In real time, compare a team. But when you put yourself in that scenario, like an 18, 19-year-old kid, 20, whatever that is, and you're dealing with a 35-year-old man, right? 38-year-old, like that is like 3 generations of hockey player almost. You know what I mean? Because like hockey careers are so short. Like we're talking about and there was a lot of those guys in that room. So to fit in, like from maturity level, from a physicality level, like from all these different aspects, it was tough, even from a social level, right? Like to find your place within that organization was challenging. I would assume it'd be a little easier for today's player, but maybe talk about that for you and like you're that step into the AHL, being around these older guys, figuring out how it was to fit in and be a pro.
Yeah, I think fitting in was always fairly easy. I just kind of from a hockey standpoint, I should say, just you go out there and play the game. And but when I can remember my first year pro, John Stevens, who is now a coach with the Dallas Stars. He was head coach of the LA Kings for a while. He had kids and he was moving houses, so he made the young kids come and move his house for him. And I remember thinking like, oh, why does this guy have a house and he's got kids? And I'm thinking like, what's going on here? And like, where am I, sort of thing. But it's life, right? And life moves on pretty quick. And you're so young and sort of naive in a lot of ways because you're coming out of junior and you're hanging out with a bunch of 16 to 19-year-olds, and then all of a sudden, people are playing hockey for a career and they're trying to earn a living to support their family. And so it's certainly an adjustment. It was eye-opening for me to kind of just see where these guys' lives, I was just a kid kind of thing. And so, but you do what you can. I think is a little different back then. It was sort of just keep your mouth shut and keep your head down and kind of do what you asked. And then if you did those things, everyone kind of left you alone to some degree, and you were able to kind of, meet the guys and bond with them throughout your play and throughout practice. And yeah.
Hockey's sort of depends on who you're talking to. Some people love it and some people don't, but like the culture of hockey in of itself, especially I think maybe more so back when we were playing, created the same type of people, like meaning, in interviews and like the way we kind of hung out and acted. And I think it was part of that scenario that you're talking about. You arrived at the scene, you're a young guy. You were expected not to say much. You're expected to, kind of fit in, keep your head down and work hard. And you became a part of that, that culture and that team identity. Nowadays, it seems like players are allowed to be more individual, and it seems like it's almost even encouraged. Do you see that, like, through the lens of a coach now, that, these guys are sort of, I don't know, allowed to be themselves, for lack of a better way to describe it?
Yeah, no, I think so, for sure. I think, I would agree with that. I'm certainly now encourage people to be themselves and whatever works for them. And but you can see the way the game is today, and I think you celebrate these individuals and their athleticism on and off the ice, and that's all helping, I think, grow the game a little bit, and certainly you see more of it now in all walks of life, I think, in all sports. So
yeah, it's definitely it's good to see. I mean, it's good to see people have a personality, give their opinion. I think it's good, especially as a fan now. And maybe it'd be a little different if you were in the room, but I don't think so too much. I think guys are a little more worth. They're willing to celebrate that, I think, a little more, or allow it and acknowledge it. You'd have a closer look at that from the veterans in your room, but it seems that the game's kind of going that way. Getting back to you and your career with your arrival into the AHL, and I looked at Hockey DB, as I do with all my guests coming up, and saw that you played some time in the East Coast League there that first year as a first year pro. I mean, was that an injury thing? Was that not good enough to make it, and a wake up call, or what was that for you in your rookie year there?
Yeah, I look back on it, probably not an injury, but probably all of the other thoughts you had on it. It was, I came into the league, maybe with a little bit of a chip on my shoulder, because at one point I was told that the Hartford Whalers, who are now Carolina, obviously, were not going to sign me to an NHL contract. So I kind of came in there with something to prove, and we were a shared American Hockey League team, which you don't see very often, and certainly not as often now, because you need the space to develop your players. But we were sharing with the Winnipeg Jets, so it was Hartford and Winnipeg. So, only so many players can play, and I know they tried to balance it so they all have their prospects developing and playing. But at a certain point during that year, we got to, with people being sent down and sort of clearing waivers, we got to an overloaded sort of American League team there with some guys that had been playing in the NHL, were all of a sudden now in the American Hockey League, and all of a sudden there wasn't room for me to play, and so they wanted to assign me to the East Coast Hockey League, and I took that moment in my career incredibly serious, and it was probably a real big crossroads for me as a player, and I was trying, you given the message that, hey, you're going down because of the bodies that we have, and we don't have enough room for you right now. But there's also what goes on through any player's mindset is, well, why am I going down? Like, why is it me? Why isn't it somebody else, kind of thing? So certainly lots of things that I wrestled with, and it was a tough moment for me, knowing what my goals were to go forward. And I thought I was taking a step back at that point, but when I look back on it, I think it helped kind of galvanize sort of my thought process and my plan a little bit.
How did it do that? Like, so you go down there, you don't have a choice, and you don't have an NHL deal at this point. So you're on a minor pro deal. Is that what you had?
No, so coming out of junior, I was told they weren't going to sign me. We eventually agreed to a contract. So I did have a contract there with Hartford, and they reassigned me to Richmond, I believe it was. So I can't, memory's fading on me, but I believe it was Richmond Renegades. Yep. And, I just had a conversation with the assistant general manager at the time, and I didn't want to go. At one point, I think I said I wasn't going to go, but you don't really have a choice if you're, you want to continue with the organization and continue to try to improve your stock as a player and as a person. You got to kind of roll with some of those punches, and so I just took it as early on in my career, it was going the wrong direction where I was, I didn't think I was playing in the NHL that year, but I was trying to establish myself in the American League as a regular. And here I am kind of taking a step back, getting demoted to the East Coast Hockey League at the time. So challenging, certainly.
Right. It was a short stint. I think it was only 4 or 5 games or something, but like you said, it galvanized you. Was your approach down there one of, I don't know, a little bit more professionalism? Were you serious when you were there? Like, what was your approach when you got down there?
I could rephrase that more sort of like, I was a little angry when I went there, and again, it was short, but when I returned to Springfield there in the American Hockey League, it just sort of made me take things a little bit more seriously than I already was, and sort of like, hey, I gotta be even better, because no matter what they're saying, I still was the one that was chosen for that demotion, if that's how you want to look at it, if you want to tier the leagues, I guess. But so I took it as, another little chip on my shoulder that I just had to be better, and I had to do more, and that's kind of what I meant by the statement there.
Gotcha. How were you told in those days? And I want you to be able to, mirror that to how it is now. Like you're a 20-year-old rookie. You're trying to establish yourself in the American Hockey League. Did you know how to do that? Like, did you know what you like to be Nolan Pratt and to establish yourself and to be a guy who's potentially going to get called up? Like, what that player looked like? Did they paint that picture for you, or were you trying to figure that out yourself?
No, I would say I was figuring that out on my own. At that time, I had visions coming out of junior. I would have had 40 something points and a couple hundred minutes and penalties coming out of my last year junior, albeit 19, playing against some younger kids. So thought I was a little bit tough, but you get there and then all of a sudden you're like, whoa, these are some real men that you're playing against, and all of a sudden you're not quite as good as you think, and you're not quite as tough as you think, and it's a reset for you. But when I came into, I think I had visions of sort of being a little bit more of an offensive player than obviously it turned out for me. And like I said back early in our conversation, just every step you go up, the level of play obviously gets better and better, and the talent pool is larger, and so I realized probably late in that year that, hey, I'm not as offensively gifted as I thought I was, based on kind of who I was around. And I started figuring that out, and I had some people around me there that, one of them's John Stevens, that I'm still friends with today, that, helped me sort of kind of open my eyes a little bit to, what it's going to take to not only just play here, but to play at the next level. So, I can get into it, but if you want to move on, that's fine. But I had a conversation with, you might remember the name Byron Ritchie.
Oh
yeah. So he, whether he would know it or not, he had a real defining moment in my career. We were playing in the American Hockey League together in New Haven, and he basically said to me one night, like, what happened to you as a player? Like, you used to be X, Y, and Z. And I was like, I was thinking in my head, I'm like, whoa, that kind of hurt a little bit. But he was bang on, and he wouldn't know it, but he helped change my career path, where I still kind of thought I should be this. And I really realized after him saying that to me that I have to be that to move on. And so I kind of stopped thinking about trying to, generate offense or points. And I wasn't really, but in my head, I thought I need to do that to get noticed, kind of thing, and kind of changed a little bit of the mold of what I was going to be as a player, and kind of dialed those things in.
Interesting. That's super cool. So him essentially calling you out on not being anything, kind of, is that a good way to put it? Like, you were trying to be one thing and sort of not really having an identity, allowed you to say, okay, I had to create an identity here.
Yeah, I would, that's for sure. That's absolutely. And that was probably, I played games in the NHL my second year pro, 9 games. And then my next year, I played 20 something. And, but it was that third year for me that he hit me with a little bit of a message. I think because I thought coming out of my second year that I was going to have more success just because I had some already. It's just going to get better for me. And in reality, it wasn't, it was, you had to work for it. And he kind of kicked me in the pants there without him probably knowing it, that I really didn't have an identity necessarily at 2 years into my career as a pro. And that third year was game changing for me.
That's really cool. I mean, that is a massive crossroads. And then to be able to make that choice to maybe be and embrace something that you hadn't previously embraced. And I'm sure you've seen that on a coaching side now, because I've talked about that in this podcast before, of like, people play and are passionate about the game, but sometimes on their terms.
Yeah.
Like I love hockey when I'm on the half wall in the PP and setting guys up in the slot and on the one timer. But now you're going to ask me to block shots in the PK, and I'm not going to get in the PP. That's not passionate. I'm not passionate about that. I don't want to do that.
Sure.
Yeah. So and some guys fall at the wayside because of that. Because like you said, that leveling up process, only so many guys can be in the PP, and if they're not prepared to make these sacrifices, let's put it in air quotes, sacrifices, that they're not willing to go there. Do you see that now? Would you echo that some guys just can't make that adjustment?
Yeah. And keep in mind, like, I coached in the American Hockey League for 5 years, and obviously a huge developmental league that feeds the NHL, and without naming names, but you see that a lot. And because, everybody is sort of like, I think of the NHL, and you go to the American League, but everyone that's getting drafted and moving on to the next, they're the best of the best. Like they're the best kid from their hometown. They're the best from their junior team, and they just are, right? And so there's things that sometimes they don't get challenged with, or details or elements of their game that they haven't really had to hone in on and work on because they've been so good. And there's certain, I know sacrifices is a term that gets thrown around a lot, but there's certain sacrifices that you have to be willing to make, and because there's going to come a point where you're not the best anymore, and what are you willing to do to continue to develop your game or broaden your game and to get to the next level, whether that's, we're talking junior or collegiate or pro, whatever your choices or your path is. So, yeah. And it was something for me that I realized that, hey, I'm not going to score a pile of points in pro, American League or NHL. And I need to be a defending defenseman that can be relied on, in all of these areas of the ice. And I need to do that with a level of grit and determination. And so I knew that if I didn't get that in my game, it was going to be tough for me to move on to another level. And it was a choice I had to basically change. Now, there's people out there that are gifted and will continue to generate offense their whole career, but there's certainly different paths for everybody, and choices you have to make along the way.
Well, and I think and the lesson to players, at least the one I want them to pick up, is the fact that you can never be too well-rounded, either,
Yeah.
right? Because sometimes you just need to do that to get your foot in the door. Like, okay, you can't play power play this year, but we want you on the team, but you have to be able to contribute in these other roles. And if you're not able to, then we can't bring you up, right? So it just allows a player to be more diverse and to gain the trust in other ways, which all of a sudden, hey, maybe now somebody's hurt in the top 6 and you get that chance because you're already at the dance. You're already there. You're already playing, I think that's get missed sometimes.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I think everyone always has a vision of what it takes to be, in any sport and any walk of life. You got to be this to have success, and that's really not the case at all. And there's, I know I've said it a few times, but there's so many different paths that a player or person can take, and the developmental path, let alone whichever path you choose, but everyone develops at a different rate, and knowing where you can carve out a niche for yourself on a team is really important.
I know you're in charge of the penalty kill there in Colorado. I believe that hasn't changed, correct? That's your
correct.
That's your responsibility. So you guys are crushing it again this year. So first of all, congratulations on that. I know that's something you take a lot of pride in. Do you, as far as from the PK perspective is concerned, why I'm going there right now is because that is one of these areas, one of these dirty areas that is really a commitment, a dedication, a choice by the player, whether they want to be a part of that or not. Do you identify players or ask players to like, how does the personnel decisions get made for something like that?
Well, I think every year at camp, you have your meetings and you have your expectations from a team standpoint, and then we, can break off into our special teams, and in some of those meetings, you want guys that obviously want to be a part of it, but it's easier said than done. And I'm not just speaking for our team, I'm speaking in my history as a player and as a coach and all of those things. And, like if I could have chosen, I would have chose to score 50 goals a year and get 100 points and play the power play, because that sounds fantastic. And it certainly is what you dream of as a kid, right? But the reality is you have to find what you're good at or what the team needs and find a way to improve upon those things. So you want guys that want to be a part of it, and the earlier not the earlier, because everyone should enjoy the game and have fun, but at the pro level, the earlier you can identify what you're good at, and what, maybe to be honest with yourself and go, hey, listen, I can't do what Nathan MacKinnon can do. That just was never going to happen for me, but I know I can do this, and I can sacrifice and commit to these areas to not just help the team win, but also give yourself success as well. Because, if a team has success, certainly at our level, it bodes well for everyone, whether you're scoring goals or keeping goals out of the net. So, obviously we look for guys that relish the opportunity and the ice time, and it's, everyone always says it's not the pretty thing that happens on the ice. It's blocking shots and chasing pucks and committing to some of those areas that are a lot of work. And not that scoring goals isn't work, but like you alluded to, that it's the dirty work sometimes that makes a difference. And we look for guys that really want to be a part of that and cherish that role.
Yeah, I think I like that. I like being, I as a player, I like knowing what I was supposed to do, and being allowed to embrace that, and then really take ownership of it. And I think in any organization, whether you're a hockey player, whether you're running a business, I think when your personnel get that, this is what we want you to do, and I want you to love it, and I want you to be great at it. Like it really, it speaks to that. And you know what, as I'm saying that, Pratter, I'm thinking back to the conversation with Brad Larson, and he said that was the first time when he was in Colorado and you guys were there together, where he said he played 3 to 5 minutes a night, and that role, though, he said the boys made him feel so important in that role. Sakic would come down at the end of the game and say, man, that hit was amazing. It's just what we needed, and his penalty kill or whatever. And he just said, he felt like that those 4 minutes, were really helpful to the team. And he just loved it. He felt a part of things. Did you feel that there in Colorado as well? And is that kind of what you're trying to get these guys to embrace when you're doing this in Colorado yourself?
Yeah, I think so. And my time here in Colorado was pretty short, but when I look back on myself in Tampa, we had some pretty talented players, and so the culture that was created and everybody's job and part within the team was so important, and I credit John Tortorella for a lot of that, and so everyone's pulling for one another in all the little areas of the ice, whether it was scoring or defending or playing with some physicality or whatever the case was. Is when your team grabs hold of that and is all in for each other, that's when you really see your team take off. And certainly that's how it was for me back in Tampa as a player, and we feel like we're developing that here in Colorado, and so I would agree with you a lot on that statement. Because
you got, PK, you can have different systems, but no one's going to be coming up with something, no one's ever seen before, right? And this is just Colorado's the only one that's able to execute this strategically, right? So I'm saying that in the sense that your personnel and their buy-in and their extra level of commitment to whatever that system is, I think is the difference when it comes to that, your ability to execute, that these guys want to do it, and they want to do it really well.
Yeah. And I think, ultimately that's what it is. Like I could change, or we could change as a staff and go to any system that we really want, but it's the buy-in and the willingness to the attention to detail, the commitment that it takes in all of those areas. You could do a lot of different things, but if they're not willing to do it, and they're not willing to push each other to do it right, and that's a lot of what we talked about this year as a team, is our guys taking ownership of it as a unit within our team. The penalty kill unit is a team within the team kind of thing, and pushing themselves. So if you don't get that, it's tough to have success. And we feel like our guys are there right now, and obviously it's a long year, but we've gotten off to a decent start.
Yeah, and you're following up on success from the previous 2 seasons, really. Like you've definitely grown that. It looks awesome. So good on you. You mentioned New Haven already. I'd be remiss if I didn't go back there for a second, because you were on another split team there with the Panther organization, and I couldn't believe the names that you played with there. Like from my past, right? Like Hugh Hamilton and Dave Lemanowitz and Ryan Johnson, my first pro roommate, and anyways, like there's just the names go on and on as far as you guys rubbing elbows together and being teammates. And that was, you already mentioned that being a really pivotal point in your whole career. Like, how did you go from being a New Haven beast, kind of an up and down guy, to solidifying that spot and becoming, an NHLer, a full-time NHLer?
Yeah, I think so. That truly was, everyone, at least they're all in a rush to get to the NHL, right? Like everybody's just, I got to get there. And the American League, I can't go to the American League. I certainly can't go to the East Coast League. And so you want to get there as fast as you can, but to me, you're only ready when you're truly ready. And I know that's a kind of a blanket statement there, but I wasn't ready until that third year for me in the American Hockey League. I look back on it now and just know, like, I needed that year I needed the coach that I had during that season, Kevin McCarthy, to be as hard as he was on me, to get me to realize that, hey, I'm trying to cruise through this. I needed Richie to kick me in the pants, and so that I could just, some reality set in for me. So I sort of didn't change my game, but I certainly dialed in the things that I knew I needed to be better at, and to show that I was going to be ready to play. And there was a lot of injuries in Carolina that year. And so really at the end of the day, there's a little bit of luck that went into it. And there was some injuries that got me the opportunity. And then more injuries along the way that, allowed me to kind of get my foot in the door and stay. And so like you said, I found a way to kind of kick the door in there and get my foot in the door enough to provide me an opportunity of some playing time. Some injuries obviously were a part of it, but that's kind of how it kickstarted my career. And I did enough to stick around there. And the following year, I came into training camp without a contract, and I was maybe getting ahead of myself a little bit. And I had a guy by the name of Keith Primo come over to me and say, "What are you doing?" Because they were basically saying, "Hey, if you don't have a contract by September 20th, we're sending you home," kind of thing. And he came over to me and he said, "Listen, if you want to play in the NHL, just sign your deal and continue to sort of build your game here and establish yourself within the team, and then see what happens from there." And so it was another guy that came to me. We were skating around on the ice before practice started, and he just warned me about, if you want to be here, let's go. If not, then it might be different for you. So, I signed the contract. I signed the contract that night, I think, maybe the next morning, with my agent. And I just said, "Hey, listen, I got to get this done. Otherwise, the opportunity was bigger to me than the contract itself. I needed the opportunity to continue to establish myself in the league. And so I took that opportunity, and served me well over the next few years. So
yeah, good for you. So it was more of a money thing at that stage. Like they were going to give you a contract, but you wanted to have a little bit more. Is that what the issue was?
Well, at that time, I think it was a two-way contract versus a one-way contract, which, as you know, is a big deal, as in pro. Huge. Whether or not. But I took the two-way to stay. So, and he was basically like, if you sign it, you've got an opportunity to stay and play here. But if you don't, you're not going to be here. And so I recognized the opportunity and believed in myself, and took the two-way contract to try to establish myself some more. Yeah.
Think that was a little insider trading potentially, like where that message was coming from? Because obviously, I mean, you were there like playing, you were negotiating, you were kind of, you were showing, you were saying these guys aren't gonna, I'm gonna call their bluff, kind of, right? A little bit, like these guys aren't gonna let me go for nothing. And he's like, hey, they're gonna let you go, man. Like sign this and stick around.
Yeah. I think, you look back on it and it could have been, I would, it might have been Ron Francis at the time or Keith. One of the two was the captain of the team, and you never know. I look at Keith as one of the best people that I was lucky to be around as a player, certainly as a young guy, and he's one of the best captains I ever had. So he's a guy that really looked out for me earlier in my career, and so I think he was there in that case looking out for me, and he sort of believed in maybe what he'd seen from me early on in my games, and recognized that if I take the opportunity, I'll have a chance to do some more of that. So, but yeah, I think, it could work both ways, certainly. Yeah.
Well, and you stuck though, right? So, I mean, it's crazy, right? Even those two things you just talked about, and thanks for being so honest with it, but like that opportunity of the injuries, like sometimes you're in a scenario where there's just no place to go, and you might be doing what you could be doing, but it's just in the wrong organization at the wrong time. Because there is a window for everybody, right? There's usually a window too, and so for you to have those injuries come up, and maybe even be in an environment where, I mean, I don't mean to speak out of school, but that potentially you're allowed to make a few mistakes at the NHL level because there's really no one else to go to either, right? So now we know we have Nolan for a little while, allows you to get comfortable, allows you to get your feet underneath you, right? Like that can be super helpful too.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that's certainly part of it. I would say we were probably on a lineup with 6 defensemen. I think we had 3 American League defensemen. Mike Rosinski, that most people probably wouldn't know. Stephen Halko was another guy. And then myself, all 3 of us were in the lineup, and we were playing heavy minutes too, because they had to play us. And so it did give you, not that I was sitting there going, well, what are they going to do if I don't play well? But it, you knew you had an opportunity in front of you, and you got to make the most of it. But I'm not shy of injuries are part of the game, and the injuries allowed me the opportunity to get my foot in the door, and I like to think that after that I took care of some things. But there's I'll go back to it again, but my path is so different to everybody else's. And you spoke of the window, like that 3-year window at that time in American League, NHL, after being drafted 3 years pro, is your window's starting to get pretty small. So I'm lucky for the opportunity, and the timing is everything on a lot of things too. Like it all just aligned itself to give me a chance, and I took advantage of it.
Yeah, no, good for you. I mean, it's kind of interesting too, like just even paralleling my own story, because like my biggest opportunity at that NHL level was my first year pro. So as a 20-year-old, like I played 39 games that year, and I mean, whether I obviously wasn't ready because I never stuck, but I mean, like that window all of a sudden like almost shut after that point. Like it's crazy how stuff can happen on guys. Like I got 4 games after that and led the AHL in goals one year at 22. Right? It was like kind of weird, right? And you never really know. So I mean, to have that opportunity, you never know when you're going to get it, is one thing I say to the guys I work with. And when you get it, you really want to take hold, because you don't know if it's coming again.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I obviously we were breaking in similar times, and so it's when you go back to the window, you just spoke of yours and how it was tougher for you after your first year, when a lot of people would be like, well, I should be established now, and so it's something that I never really felt super secure. Like I always felt like I had to continue sort of proving myself year in, year out. And the one time that I sort of let myself get comfortable, I got traded from Carolina to Colorado, and just maybe getting a little bit ahead of myself on what I really was as a player. And so, but my window was probably almost squeezed shut in my 3rd year. But I also needed that 3rd year of pro American League to break through that window, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like if I didn't have that 3rd year and that time there and all of the things that kind of transpired there, I don't know that I would have ever pushed through sort of that window, so to speak. So, anyway, yeah.
You never know.
I'm just thinking back on it. Yeah.
And that was like Ryan Johnson, RJ, who was a recent guest. He said that was a real formative year for him too. Like, he had actually had success on that team that year from a points perspective, but it was a year for him where it really crystallized as well that he knew that he was going to have to be great at other things to be able to take that next step too.
Sure.
And obviously he went on to a great NHL career as well.
Yeah. Yeah. He's fantastic. And he's one of the nicest people that I ever played with, and still has an impact in the game today. And we had a nice group there, and we had a nice mix of some veteran players that had been around the American League and the NHL and up and down and all of those things that I think helped. And Kevin McCarthy, our head coach there, was a big part of that for me as well. And knowing what it would take from certain guys to have some success, and I would think that RJ might speak the same way.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned McCarthy being hard on you. I don't know him personally, but you also had Paul Maurice. You also had Bob Hartley for a little bit there. You also had John Tortorella. So you have some guys that, I don't know what you want to say, it kind of from the old school type approach era there. Was that? Obviously, you had a great career. It must have done something well for you. Any one of those guys stands out in particular? I know you already talked about Torts and the impact he had.
Yeah, I think all of them in their own way. And McCarthy wasn't a hard coach, but he had some hard messages for me when I needed it, kind of thing. And I've had conversations with him after the fact. And I think just a couple of years ago, I told him the whole story of how he basically embarrassed me in front of the whole team. He was right for doing it, and I told him, I said it had a lasting impact on me, and I said I wanted you to know that conversation. I said you might not even remember it, but I do, and so I think everybody.
Sure.
Yeah, well, so I had just been. Is after I played 25 games. In Carolina at the end of the season. It was with the injuries, and I was recalled, and a bunch of us were recalled, and I came into training camp thinking that I'm gonna play here this year because I played 25 games last year because of injuries, and so obviously I'm gonna play, but it doesn't work that way. And so I was sent down to the American Hockey League and pregame skate. So I sent down that day. I think it was myself and Stephen Halko, and we're pregame skate. And I'm just kind of cruising around like I'm a big deal, because I just got sent down. And we're doing this. We're just doing a big horseshoe, like as simple as you can get, horseshoe pregame skate. And someone missed me with a pass. And I will admit, he missed me by like quite a bit, but I didn't really make an effort to like stop on it and gather the puck and go and finish the drill. I just kind of wheeled back to the corner, and he blew his whistle and came racing down to the corner. So you got half the team in one corner and half in the other. And he, I won't use all the words that he used, but explained to me that, I'm skating around like my stuff doesn't stink, and that's got to change. And it just kind of took me back. Like I was like, whoa. And my initial thought was like, why is he being so rough on me? But he was right. And so it just kind of reset my thinking for me, and I credit him for doing that. And then I probably got away from it again, and that's the same year that it was early on Brian Ritchie did the same thing to me. So yeah. I never thought of myself as necessarily an arrogant kid, but you can get off track, with some success, and you got to, as cliche as it is, you got to remember how you had the success. So I was so thrilled to be in the NHL with Carolina and Paul Maurice and those guys. So I probably didn't know any better still. I was just like a puppy dog trying to soak up everything, but he was fantastic as well. I still have a good relationship with him and speak to him whenever I see him. And Bob was a hard coach, and I think he would admit that he was a hard coach, and everybody knows that he is. And but he was going to do whatever he thought necessary to push you out of your comfort zone. And but if you think of some of the stories that I'm telling you, but maybe I got into my comfort zone too easily at times, and so you need people to push you out of them. And Tortorella is certainly someone that will do that as well. So I I never shied away from it. I think it helped me be the player that I was and the person that I am. And, you know, if you're willing to embrace it and look at it as a coaching tool, if you're a player in those situations, I think you can really grow from them and learn from them. And you know, I've been lucky. All of my coaches have just wanted nothing but the best for me as a player or us as a team. And they're just trying to make you better and help you get better. And if you use it in the right way, it can help you a ton. And it certainly did for me.
That's great. Yeah. I think that's sometimes where these harder coaches lose the message that it's actually about the player. You know what I mean? It's about them wanting the best for you. And I think sometimes that gets lost, you know, and you just think this guy's a dick and he hates me and he doesn't like me. Oh, no. He actually wants you to be better. And this is a way for him to try and do that. And I don't know. I mean, I think back in our day, like no one would ever talk to you about this is a strategy for me to get you better. You just had to like roll with it and adapt to it and figure it out. Whereas now I think talking to coaches, it sounds like maybe that message is a little bit more like, hey man, this is what I'm going to do for you. And this is how we're going to do it. You might not like it, but this is all for you to be the best player you can be. Yeah,
I think so for sure. It was, you know, you just dealt with it in our era and it's the way it was. And, you know, players today, they want more information. They want to know why, they want to know how, sort of thing. And you lay that out for them and you be as honest with them as you can. And I think that's all they want, you know, honesty and from their coaching staff. It's certainly what I wanted as a player. Just hit me with what it really is. And I'll do whatever I need to do to correct that or keep working on all of those things. And so, yeah, for me, because, you know, I look back and none of those coaches were anything but honest to me. And so I consider myself super lucky to have had that, you know, early in my pro career and NHL career, that no one was hiding anything from me. And so with that, I was able to just kind of focus in on, okay, well, this is the way it is and this is what I got to do. So.
It sounds like you were a coachable player, and in an interview, a press interview that I read about you, you said, and I wrote it down. I thought it was great. You said the best players are usually the ones that want to be coached the most. They want to be coached the most and are willing to work with you and are the most willing to work with you. Can you describe what that means, coachability? Like if you were to say this is a trait that you would desire in a player, how would you break that down for them, what that means to you?
Yeah, I think it's just, you know, in the heat of the moment, nobody necessarily likes to be told that they're wrong or that it wasn't good enough. And certainly those things happen. And I'll be the first to admit, like, I'll go back and look at things after a game on video and just go, I wasn't right on that. And I'll be the first guy to go to that player and go, hey, listen, the other night when we had a little exchange, I was off. I misread that play during the game, kind of thing. But you know, the players, they're willing to absorb the information and I'm not saying that, you know, I'm just talking in broad sense of the term, but you know, if I go back to my American League days, you know, we touched on sort of players coming in and thinking they were one thing, and then trying to help them identify that, hey, like, this is probably more where you're going to fit and where you're going to see yourself, or this is what you're going to need to do to establish yourself. And some players are more willing to accept that information than others, whether it's in practice, through video, through, you know, in the heat of the moment in the games. And some people, you'll watch them, you'll give them information and you can watch them trying to implement those things into their game, into their practice, and you can see it. And then you'll see others that maybe necessarily the repeated mistakes and sort of well, I think I should do it this way kind of thing. And you're always going to have guys that are more willing to accept the information than others. And you know, you just you find a way with coaching, I think, on how to relate to those players and how to best give them the information that can help them have some success. And everybody's a little different. And I think that's a big part of coaching is how do you relay that message and how do you present that information and how do you get them to accept it and kind of run with it. And not all coaches are not always right. I'll admit that. And we make mistakes like everybody, but the players that want that and look for it, I think, are the ones that I see have the most success.
It's the modern approach to coaching. I'll say modern in just a broad sense, and you seem to speak to it from listening to you and from what I've read, is a little bit more catered to the individual than it was 25 years ago when we were playing, where it was more a message to the collective, and you needed to get on board with that message to the collective. Do you find that to be true, that now you're catering to more of an individual, on an individual basis to a collective approach, like meaning trying to find the best way for a player with a given skill set to be the best player they can be within this system, this ecosystem of the Colorado Avalanche?
Yeah, I think so. And I think of, I've never been a head coach, but from speaking from an assistant coach, there's a lot of that goes on with my day-to-day routine on individual work and video sessions or conversations and meetings. And there is, I would say, you nailed it with, 25 years ago when we were breaking in, it was, here's the puck and sort of feast or famine. Let's see who comes out of this pile and who's the best kind of thing. And you either sink or swim, without too many cliches there, but that's really kind of how it was to some degree. And that's slowly sort of changed here over the time. And players now are, my daughter trains individually with a trainer here in Denver to help her, improve her footwork and her speed and her power. So everyone's isolating into these individual sort of elements. And I think nowadays in coaching, there is a lot of individual things that go on within that team concept. And so I certainly do a lot of that on a day-to-day basis, all trying to help the player mature and get better in the areas that he needs to, so that collectively we are better as a team. So.
Back when we played, the assistant coaches were generally the liaison, right? That safe, friendly, sometimes for lack of a better word, point of contact between you and the head coach, and maybe sort of that inside poker type scenario. Is that still sort of the way it is, or do you feel you're the feet on the ground that are establishing the relationships and building the trust and kind of getting to know these players as people as well as players?
Yeah, and I wouldn't say that I'm doing that any more than Jared Bednar is himself. The game today and coaching today, it is a lot about the relationships that you build with the athletes and the team. And but there's certainly, as an assistant, there's a line that you kind of walk, with the head coach and the players, and it's always been that way. And sometimes you have to be a sounding board for players, and you're always making sure that you're delivering the team message to those players. But there's certainly that aspect to it for sure as an assistant coach.
My head's just going because I think personally, the X's and O's are always going to be a part of the game. I don't need to discount it. However, I think that the incremental gains, and I think the thing that makes teams be great isn't the X's and O's. I think it's the EQ. I think it's the emotional element. I think it's the relationship element and the trust that gets built in these other areas. If you do agree with me, how do you go about building that skill of how to deal with people and how to get the most out of people within their skill set so they can do the X's and O's properly?
Yeah, well, I certainly agree with you. And I think when I think of all the teams that I played with, from our bantam days to my junior success or failures, and even on to the American Hockey League and in the NHL, as a coach and as a player, the best teams that I ever played on were the closest teams. And they certainly were. And I think I would be shocked if anyone said any different. And we had the most fun. We had the best time as a group, as a team, and that connection and that sort of growth as a team that comes and happens, and it happens organically, because there's just a certain point during a season, or maybe over the course of a couple of seasons, where you really see your team come together and know that they're all kind of pulling in the same direction. And so it comes from your players at a certain point. And from a coaching perspective, I never thought that, like, when I was 27 years old, I wasn't going, hey, I'm going to be coaching when I'm done playing kind of thing. It just slowly sort of started creeping into my mind later in my career, and thought that it'd be something that I would enjoy and be a part of the game. And so you kind of jump into it with not a lot of knowledge, to be honest with you, but I fall back on a lot of the things that I went through in my career, and I rely on those things to kind of help me as a coach now. And I don't talk about myself as a player, and like you said before, like, it was a long time ago when you start talking about today's game, but I use a lot of those skills that I learned as a player and as a younger coach to help me now and today. And because your past is really helpful in these areas here when you're helping young guys develop and grow as people and players. And I use it a lot.
Yeah.
If that answers your question there, I think.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, you did for sure. I mean, I think it's hard to probably put a finger on one thing, right? But I know for me, even what I do, like, my biggest growth has been in that aspect. Of course, being a student of the game and what are teams doing and what's happening to the game. Like, you have to have your pulse on that. But I think, my biggest growth, my biggest successes has been in, like, what makes the person tick behind this athlete, right? Like, what makes this person be good, and how can I communicate what I see for them, and how that's going to relate to them, so it's relatable in a way that they're now going to be able to implement these actions and want to take action, and want to take consistent action, right? Like, all these different things are, like, to me, that's psychological, and it's not necessarily physical. And yeah, I mean, you can expose yourself to different people. Conversations like this help me. Different books help me, right? There's different ways to soak this stuff up. But I see that direction of coaching and that direction of, like, success being more along those human, psychological lines rather than the physical lines right now.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. And it's all, building that relationship and that trust with that individual player. And when you can get that, and you can, and it's not just coach and player, and there's a level of trust and commitment on both sides. And it's something that doesn't happen instantly all the time. And certain guys are more reserved than others in certain areas, but when they realize and they can accept that you have their best interest in mind, and then I think that's when that relationship can grow. And and I know for myself, like, I didn't always love all the decisions John Tortorella made for me as a player, but I trusted that he was honest with me, and so I could accept some of them, even though I might not like some of them. I could accept them and try to grow from them, because I trusted him. I still would to this day. I know he's an honest man, and when the players recognize that in you, and now how do you relay that, and how do you do that? I think that's all individually. You gotta learn as you're going through, and find what works for you, and identify what works for one player or another might not work for the next, and trying to find the ways to push them and prod them and help them and all those areas.
The other aspect of that, we're kind of doing a deep dive on this right now, but is, like, I think personally, is finding your individual authenticity and identity as a coach to help those players find their individual authenticity, right? Because if you're, I mean, again, my opinion, but if you really like John Tortorella, you trying to be John Tortorella probably isn't going to work, because the boys are going to see through that loud and clear, right? So you have to find who Nolan Pratt is in this environment to be able to use whatever traits that you might want to pick up on from some of these other mentors or role models that you had. Do you find that's part of your own personal evolution too as a coach?
Yeah, no, I think so. I think as a coach, I've always been, make sure you know your stuff, and you got to be true to yourself and be who you are. And if you try to be anything different than that, players recognize that fast. If you're saying one thing but doing another thing, or not always holding different players or people to a certain level of accountability, the players see that, and they see it early, and if you lose that, then you're losing their trust and their respect in those areas. And so you got to be yourself, and find a way to help your guys with being who you are. And if you change that and you try to be something that you're not, it will never work for you, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I agree. I got to touch on we're getting close on time here. It's always the way it goes. But I mean, two-time Stanley Cup champion, like 2001 with Colorado. Like you said, you had a short time there, and you didn't play any playoff games. Were you on the black? You were a black ace that year, I assume, traveling with them.
So I was on the regular roster the whole season. I was traded from Carolina at the draft, and then I got traded again in the summer. But I played the whole season in Denver, and just ended up being the odd man out for one reason or another, and there for the whole thing and practice. So wasn't a black ace, but I didn't play any games that year. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So you were whatever, a normal practice player, but just didn't get in the roster.
Yeah.
What did that mean for far as your name on the cup? Is your name on the cup in that scenario?
Yep, on there. So I think I played 40 something games there, and I think it comes down to ownership or general managers. They make those decisions when it comes down to it. And but I was there the whole season and a part of it from training camp to the end, and wasn't necessarily the way I envisioned it going. I know that when I was traded, I remember really good friends with Adam Deadmarsh, who was already there, and who you would know obviously very well. And I remember thinking, I'm going to win a Stanley Cup when that trade happened. And I told my family that like the second after I was traded, and we did. And, I would have loved to have been more a part of it, but I take some valuable lessons out of that. And it was a tough year for me, but it was an incredible year at the same time. I learned a ton as a player, and probably more importantly as a person.
That was when you guys beat Florida in 4, right?
No, that's 96. We were Jersey.
Right, 96. Yeah. Sorry. 96. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
Wow. So that one is it must have been really special then. Like fast forward 4 years. Now you're in Tampa. Now you play 20 games. Now you're a part of that grind, the physical grind, the mental grind on the daily, and you get to hoist that cup with sweat on your brow. Like how describe that feeling and what that whole team was all about and how you guys came together that year.
Yeah, that was a few year process there that had taken place with, through the draft and bringing in veteran players like Dave Andrechuk, Tim Taylor, but also drafting Marty St. Louis came to our team, Dan Boyle, but they drafted LeCavier, Brad Richards. So, bringing in Habib Bula. And so it was a process to get there. And I was a part of it for a couple of years before we ended up winning. But, I just think at a certain point that the biggest thing for me would be going back to, Tortorella and the culture that was created within that organization and that team. And everyone was held to the same standards. So whatever your ability was, you were expected to perform in these certain areas. And at a certain point during that year, we were fully bought in as a team, and it really, took off on its own. And we just kind of steamrolled through it there. And we felt invincible, I think, and at least that's certainly how it felt for me. In every series and along the step of the way, I was like, well, I don't see any way. We were sort of, they're not. They've struggled in Montreal in the past, or they've struggled on the road against the Islanders, or they haven't played well against Philly. Like I don't know that I ever doubted ever at any point during that playoff run that we weren't going to win. And even we were down 3-2, had to go to Calgary and win. And
overtime.
I can remember my parents asking me, well, should we book a flight to Calgary to come watch? And I was like, well, why don't you just stay here for game 7? And it wasn't like an arrogance. It was just like, that was my belief in our team and what we were doing, that we'd be back for game 7 to win. And, one thing led to another, and it did happen for us, but I felt like our whole team felt like that. So.
That's wild. I guess I mostly spoke about Martin St. Louis earlier in the conversation. You were really a first eyewitness account of, maybe not the early days, right, when Calgary let him go and said you'll never play in the NHL, which it's like, I just love that story for so many reasons. Obviously, the youngest players listening. You talked earlier about people telling you couldn't do something or you would never be something. And, Martin St. Louis went from being somebody that they said they couldn't play in the league to, being the best player in the league, winning the Art Ross Trophy, win the MVP. Like, that's just such a crazy, crazy ascension. And you saw it. Like, what did you see in those few years that you were there with him to kind of from where he started to where he ended up?
Yeah, well, he ends up in the Hall of Fame, right? So
Yeah.
he's I will just say, like, him, he was such a hard worker, man. Like, he is so competitive and wanted to perform at the highest level at all times, whether it was in practice. And we used to have these little games that we'd play, these one-on-one games, and obviously I was on the defending side of it, but we would do it all the time, pre-practice and post-practice. And um, he's just always fine-tuning his game, but he was um, just an ultra competitive player, and was never going to be told no on, whether it was within a game or his career path that you spoke of there early. And incredible person, incredible family, just like a real joy to be around as a player. And I'm feel privileged to have had the chance to play with him. But he's someone that you want to be around, and whether it was on the ice or off the ice. And guys want him to follow his work ethic and his commitment and his will, if you say so.
All right. I spoke with Kevin Weeks, who had the privilege of being there with him too for a while, and we talked about the mindset side of it. And we talked about it a little bit with you. It sounded, well, with Martin and with a lot of players. I know for me, I never could quite get there myself either, but Kevin spoke about Martin he had to get to the point where he believed he could be that player at the NHL. And it took him a little while, to do it for whatever reason. Did you, like, how do you feel about that mindset? And we talk about the toolkit and like the physical skills of somebody, but that has to be present with the mindset to allow those skills or that player to come out. Either as a player or now as a coach, can you speak to mindset and how big of a piece of a puzzle that is for players?
Yeah, it's huge. And I talked about my career sort of as a player, and some of the things that I went through, and when I got off track and didn't have the right mindset, that's when I had people that were there to correct me and help me, and I was willing to listen to it, and maybe always didn't like it, but when you're able to sit back and look at it, whether it's the next day or when you take your skates off or when you walk out of the video room, you realize that, hey, it's not wrong. That's right. And I have to embrace that. And, because everybody that gets drafted is a really, really good hockey player, right? They really are. But that's just sort of the beginning of the journey. And getting drafted is one thing, and then getting a contract's another. And I didn't realize that until I was going through it. I just figured I was drafted, I'm going to get a contract. And then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, I might not get a contract. Like, well, what do you do then? Right. And so just the mental side of the game obviously is huge from your path and your journey and the process that you're going through as a young player or turning pro, whatever the case is. And then even within games and in between games, and how you prepare yourself, and how you prepare yourself before a game, how you prepare yourself shift to shift, and being able to focus and let go of certain things, and all of those things. I can't even I have a tough time putting into words how important it is. But I think the best athletes in the world are also not just the physical attributes that come along with it, but they have the mental toughness and capacity to take on all those things. And if you don't have that, it's a tough go. And so it's something that you can continuously work on and improve upon as a person and as a player, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. Thanks for ending with that. It's there's an intangible. It's tough to make that tangible, I think, right? Because you're talking about mental toughness and everything you're talking about, right? I think mindset is huge for your development, right? If you don't have the right mindset about how you can get better and where the possibilities are, or how to do that even, and your approach to that, that's an issue. You don't have the right mindset when it comes to dealing with adversity. That's an issue. If you don't have the right mindset when it comes to how the coach is treating you or what the words are, that's an issue. So there's so many elements being a pro or being the best at anything, let's just say that, where your head comes in to take precedence over the skill set, the physical skills that you have in your body. But it's hard, and I don't think a lot of players are, especially at the youth level, especially at the junior level, actually working consciously on how to improve these things that we're talking about. When you're at that level now, and as a coach, like, do you feel that you have a role in that, like to help them with the mindset side of the game in whatever capacity that might be?
I think so. And it's, I think a lot of those are just individual conversations that you have with players and things that you may recognize in a game or in an off day, or it could be a mood in practice, whatever it is. And there's certainly things that you try to be aware of. And, I want players, when I'm talking to players, I just want them, if it's in the heat of a game, I just want them to hear what I've said and register it and go, okay, now it's time to move on. I don't want them to dwell on, I certainly don't want to get into their head too much, certainly in games. So you don't want them to dwell on things, but you want them to be able to process it and then move on whichever direction, whether it was negative or positive. And the players that are good at doing that are the ones that you see the consistency in their game and you watch them go out there and perform night in, night out. Well, they're dialed in from the mental aspect of the game as well. And that is really, like, when you talk about a lot of the things, like the physical side, obviously you need the physical traits and skills to have success at the NHL level, but as much or more importantly, you need the mental skills to deal with that adversity and the challenges, because you're going to be tested. You're going to be tested on that career path for certainly for an ice hockey player. You're going to be tested daily, not just in games, but in so many different facets of the game and life, and how you deal with those is, will certainly could change your path along the way.
Yeah, it impacts you big time. If they're like, I'm just trying to think of a hard example of how there might be a teaching moment when it comes to a mindset scenario. And let's just pretend that, whatever, it's a practice or it's a game. There's some scenario, you give some feedback to a player, you watch, maybe it's like right now in the moment that the reaction or the response isn't amazing. Maybe you see afterwards that they're not really retaining it. Is that something that you would maybe go back and revisit, and not from like, I'm gonna mad at you standpoint, but from the standpoint of like, hey, I noticed your reaction to this scenario and I don't think it really served you. Like, why did you respond that way? What could we do different? Like, how can I help you with that? Is that a conversation you might have?
Absolutely. And I could think of, Sam Girard here is one of our young defensemen. I had that conversation with him, a few days ago, a reaction that maybe from something I said on the bench that I was surprised by. And then we chatted about it the next day at practice. And I read it differently than, say, he did so the conversation, I think they're good to happen. And you certainly, everyone's going to react to information differently. And obviously, if it's negative feedback in the moment, nobody wants to hear that they've done something wrong or potentially it was your fault. So, how you relay those message and recognize how different players handle it, and whether it's the tone of your voice that you use or your own body language that you're, using when you're making those statements. They all read into all of those things, and everybody does. And so finding a way to fine tune those from a coaching perspective for each individual is something that you have to do from an individual standpoint, but collectively as a team too, making sure that they're all sort of at the same, held to the same standard.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I'm just seeing that interaction now because not everyone deals that way. Like, meaning that, okay, you're having this conversation potentially to help the player with the reaction, but at the same time, you're soaking up their response to you because you want to know how to better approach them. Like you say, whether it's a tonality of your voice, whether it's a body language thing, right? Because at the end of the day, you're trying to improve and you're trying to get them to improve. I think that's when it's like a dance. And I think that's when it's really done well, right? That you're not just coming at them saying, I've had it all figured out and this is all on you. Like, we're still in this together. We're both shooting for the same thing and let's grow together. And I think that's appreciated, I think, by the players. I know it would have been appreciated by me.
Yeah, I think one of the guys that I know that does a fantastic job of that is John Stevens. And I've listened to him present at certain coaching clinics, and he talks a lot about some of that stuff that he went through with Drew Doughty and when he was young, and obviously LA was in their heyday winning Stanley Cups and sort of working through those emotions in a game and what those emotions mean to the rest of your team, to the other team, to people, you know what I mean? So and how to handle those, and what the message is that you're delivering to your own teammates based on your reaction to something that may have happened from a ref, from your teammates, the other team. And so, I think it's all things that can benefit today's athlete and try to help them not just get better from a physical standpoint and a skill standpoint, but the mental side of it. And I don't claim to be an expert in it, but I think, people in general can all relate to a lot of these things just from a human standpoint.
Yeah.
And you treat people the right way with honesty, and people will respect you for it, and I think that's how I've gone about it from my standpoint anyhow.
Yeah. And I don't think it's not about being an expert, in my opinion. It's just about being conscious of the fact that it exists. And I think you even being able to say that is like an acknowledgement of, like, now you're aware of it. And I think the awareness of something allows you now to be a student of it, and allows you to at least give it credit. Right. So I think that's absolutely a huge step too. I'll leave you with two questions, maybe, if you have time. Are you okay with two more?
Yeah, go for it.
One is that what I just said is the ability to self-assess. It's been a little bit of a hot topic for me, because a lot of the stuff that I do with players or with teams that I work with is trying to develop their self-awareness so they have the ability to self-assess. I think that it's a valuable tool, because if you do know where you're at from an honest, unbiased perspective, as well as we can be, now you have information, right, to be able to do something with. You spoke about comfort zones earlier, and it now pushes our ability to get out of our comfort zones, I think, if we can self-assess. Do you hold that in pretty high regard? That was what Ryan Johnson said is, like, one of the first things he looks for in a player is his ability to do that. And sometimes there's some red flags if they can't, because he knows he has to approach players differently. Can you speak a little bit about a player's ability to self-assess and how valuable that is for them?
Yeah, I think it's if I look back as a player, my maybe inability early on to really self-assess kind of where I was at and where I needed to go was holding me back a little bit. And so as a coach, in my coaching career, the ones that are able to self-assess, and I've had conversations with players about the inability to do some of those things and how it will hold you back as a player and really as a person if you can't look at yourself honestly and be okay saying, hey, I wasn't good enough here, or that wasn't good enough there. You're gonna struggle to grow. So certainly things that, like, I just always, and it's easy to say, but the guys that are more accepting of certain aspects of coaching are usually very good at being able to self-assess. And I think if you took, like, self-assessment, at least in my world here in coaching, if you really looked at it as, it's not about the one single moment right now. It's about more than that. And so looking at it in a broader sense of the process and the whole path and the whole career arc that you're on, self-assessing yourself and being able to say, God, I was brutal tonight. It doesn't really matter that you were so bad tonight. It's about, when you look back on it, okay, well, how do I correct that? And so being able to admit that, hey, I wasn't at my best, or I didn't do my best job, whether that's coaching, and I've, certainly made decisions, for instance, on the penalty kill that I would look back on and go, God, that was a mistake. And, right. We go through it, we give up 3 goals on the penalty kill, and it's like, that's on me tonight. And so, but being able to, I think it allows you to grow, being able to just say, hey, listen, you can be honest with yourself, and be able to accept that it's not going to be perfect every night or every day, and being able to accept that. And then how do you grow from that? And how do you take another step as a player or a person is huge. And I wouldn't disagree with RJ at all in that statement. And, because at the end of the day, you're just being honest with yourself if that's what you're doing, right? And if you fail to do that, then it's tough to improve.
Yeah, and I'll just follow that up with, we've all had players, and maybe we can even look at ourselves as individuals, but some guys when they turn that lens on themselves are overly critical, right? And some guys are also overly positive. So, like, it's okay to celebrate successes, because I think a lot of guys that do get to higher levels are generally pretty hard on themselves. I mean, they just are. We're sort of wired that way. And sometimes you need, whether it's as a coach or a leader or as some type of, influencer in these people's lives, to be like, you know what, you did a lot of things well too, though. Like, let's be honest here, right? Like, let's not just focus on the negative. And then there's some guys that think everything is roses, and you have to be like a little bit more, well, no, buddy, it wasn't maybe as great as you think it was tonight. So I think it does work both ways. That self-assessment, I guess, side of it is all I'm saying with that.
Yeah, no, and I would, and I didn't mean to put a negative spin on that. That would be both ways, absolutely. And you have to be able to recognize as a coach when it is a good night. I think you need to reinforce those things, and why and how and what did you do today that made you better tonight, and why were you so good tonight. So being able to assess on both sides is critical to success. Yes.
Yeah, that's cool. You know what just came to mind, and I'm sorry I'm going on a tangent here, but you catch them when they're good just came to mind. And I think that's a little bit maybe of a new philosophy in coaching too, because it was always catch them when they're bad and remind people when they're bad back in the day. Like, do you have that more of a coaching philosophy now, is like to remind guys when they've done stuff well and acknowledge that success?
Yeah, I think so. I think like when I think of, if I was to sit down with you and do a video session from last night's game, we'll sit down and I'll cut out kind of all the fluff in your game and just kind of dial it into certain areas of your game. And I go through that approach with, I show the good and the bad throughout the whole game. And I'll try to just kind of do it in order of the game happens. So I'm at the same time, I'm showing you where you were having success one night. I'll show you, hey, this is where you were struggling and this is why. So I try to do both at all times. And I think players need to see, when you're playing well and you feel good and you're feeling confident, and the game just kind of comes a little easier for you at whatever level it is, when that confidence is there for you. And how do you find a way to continuously find that level of confidence? So I think it's important for them to see the areas that they're having success and the areas that they need to improve upon.
All right. My last question is just on preparation, and it's such a, and I want to ask you just because it's such an important piece of what I do with the teams that I work with and with the players that I work with, is just, I call it becoming consciously competent, right? Whether it's for the team or whether it's for the player. So to understand why you are good when you're good. So it's not just like it happens, right? And I think preparation is a big part of that. I think like their approach and finding out, like from a body and from a mind standpoint, what do you need to do to be at the best of your ability? When you were a player, I mean, I think it was like, it was something that was happening while we were going through it, as far as like what that preparation process looked like for people. I don't think it was like a real science like it is now. Can you describe when you were playing your best, what your preparations looked like, and maybe contrast that with some of the players in your team now, or what it would look like for let's say a more modern day athlete, what guys are doing?
Yeah, I think if I look back on my career, there's certain aspects, not just like preparation before a game, but preparation throughout an off season, that I would have liked to have done better when I look back, and in investing in my body and even the mental side of the game for me. I feel like I could have done more to help myself and maybe prolong my career. Maybe I would have been the same player, but I feel like I could have prolonged my career if I took certain areas and tried to improve upon them. And today's player in today's game, they are finely tuned athletes, and certainly ahead of and that's not a knock on players in my era, because they certainly were incredible athletes. But today's athlete seems even more tuned in than 25 years ago, obviously. And so they're so well prepared and so well focused in on what they need to do. And probably getting off topic here. Was it from a physical standpoint, or you mentally, or?
Well, I mean, I think the one that eludes people most is more the mental side. I think, especially from a young player, like I think guys understand they need to get their rest. I think they understand that they need to put some food in their body. But I think sometimes the ball gets dropped on that, how to have your mind ready for either the competition that's coming, the competitive level you need to get to, the intensity, or even not to be thinking on the ice, right? To prepare your mind to know the systems, like whatever that process is. Like maybe you could speak more on that if you don't mind.
Yeah, I think, individually, I think everybody handles it differently, and your preparation and what you do to get ready for those games. And, I was a creature of habit, and I like to do things in the same order. I don't consider myself superstitious by any means, but I had an order and a process to get ready for games, and whether that was, and I still do now as a coach. I do all my stuff kind of in the same sort of order to get prepared. And you watch our players have routines that they go through. They have, their arrival times and their prep that they start with during the games. And that really starts the night before with how they handle themselves and what they do. And so that when they wake up, they are feeling fresh and they're ready to go. And then I think, a term that maybe is used too loosely, but sticking to the process, whether it's individually or collectively as a team, but being able to know what the end goal is for this season, and are things that help our guys stay focused night in, night out, or week to week and month to month throughout our season. So the preparation never sort of stops for them, I don't think. And,
right.
and being, knowing what our goals are collectively is I think been a big thing for us as a team to keep us focused and keep us, pointed in the right direction.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I got my shirt on. I don't know if you can see it, but I say greatness is a decision.
Yeah.
And I think, that's kind of part of preparation too. I shouldn't say kind of, it is, because I think that there are a lot of choices that do get made between the whistles and the puck drop, on the ice that are going to help you either from a collective organizational standpoint or from an individual standpoint to be, your greatest, to step into that greatness. And you mentioned process, which is another interesting thing, because when I'm working with young players and probably not at your level, guys coming up, but I'm like, if you can't describe what you're doing as a process, you don't really know what you're doing.
Yeah.
So like if you're not touching on something to do with your mind, if you're not touching on some type of visualization before a game, if you're just showing up and thinking this is going to work out well for you, you don't really know what you're doing yet. And that's okay, because we can figure it out. But you do need to have some type of process, because there's a decision there to be your best, and there's habits that are going to go along with that.
Yeah, and listen, when you're young, it's tough, because as a kid, I play mini sticks in the hallway and then go play, right? But
yeah.
You begin to recognize what you maybe were doing or what you were thinking before you enter those games and or those trips. And as you get older, you need to be able to, as you said, self-assess and recognize why you had success and how you're going to have success moving forward. And it's something that as you continue to get a year older, I think you continue to recognize those things a little bit easier than when you're younger.
Yeah, no, maturity, for sure. And I think that doesn't get touched on enough in the mainstream media. Like, you have a Bowen Byram there, who I've mentioned already, and a lot of the guys in your team. Just because Nathan McKinnon, he's 25, I think. Is that what he is now? 25?
Yeah,
so,
he might still be 24, but yeah.
But it's crazy, right? Because we've known him for so long. We forget that, this is still a 24, 25-year-old, man, right? Like, and we don't get enough credit to the emotional maturity that is required, that we all just inherently don't have just because of our age. Just because they're amazing athletes doesn't mean that they're all of a sudden 35-year-old men,
Absolutely.
So there's a lot of a learning process there, and and it's good. I think going back to maybe that's a good way to close, like going back to the idea of being coachable and being humble enough within this facility that they have, that is so talented, to remain humble enough to be coachable and know that they haven't all quite figured it out yet. I know I was victim of that. When things go well for you and you're a talented kid and you're doing these things, like, there's no reason to really think you don't have it figured out, because it's always been going so well, right? But I think that's who you are surrounded with. I think that's the message, from your coaches and everyone, to keep that grounded ability to be humble, have the humility to be able to know that you need to grow and just grow within the game. And I know that that's something that makes you light up inside, because I've read some of the stuff that seeing these guys develop, seeing these guys go on to pro careers and establish themselves is such a thing that you can have so much pride about, because it's you're part of that journey. It's so fun.
Yeah, no, it is, and I think it's one of the most fun things that I do is being a part of these guys they're young, you know what I mean? And our team, we have a young team, and some of them are, Byram's closer to my daughter's age than he is to mine. And so you got to keep that in mind when you work with these guys. And, it's a young man's game. It's turning into one. And so, yeah, you try to help them along the way. And I take a lot of pride in trying to be a part of that journey and enjoy their successes, but also but be there when it's not perfect for them either. So.
No, well, thanks so much. We'll wrap up here. My God, I mean, I could ask you questions for all day. We just need to get a 6-pack of beer and we'd be just fine. But yeah, no, I mean, I think that's a great way to end. I know that you're doing a ton of great stuff there, you and Bedsy. What an amazing thing to be a part of that you're on right now. I know you guys are all excited every game. We got to get back to playing, but I know that this season had high expectations just as last. And it's nice because when you're in that window, that building point where this thing is happening, it's coming together, and you don't get that opportunity all the time. So it's fun to watch, man. I really appreciate you sharing your lessons with my listeners today on this platform, and all the nuggets and all the insight from being a player and making it happen, and also now helping guys become their best is much appreciated, Pratter. So thanks so much.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you reaching out. So we haven't chatted for a while, but it was great. It was good fun. So almost as much fun as our bantam days there when we were tearing it up. So, but it's crazy when you think back on that team, how talented it was for such a young age, and what some guys did after the fact. But anyway, ultimately, it was a ton of fun. So today.
Yeah, well, thanks again. And like, one of the best parts of doing what I'm doing now is because I'm talking to guys that either had a relationship in the past, have an ability to catch up and kind of revisit it in a way that to me is like so fills me up. Like, I love these conversations because it's better than doing it in a bar somewhere or whatever, right? Real conversations about real things. It serves my soul, and I always leave these conversations feeling jacked up. So thanks so much for sharing today. It's awesome.
All right, man. I had fun. So
okay. I'll let you, we'll just conclude here. Thanks so much. This is Nolan Pratt, assistant coach of the Colorado Avalanche, for episode 52. Thanks for everyone tuning in today, whether you're on YouTube or whether you're on Facebook or whether you're just listening this afterwards on whatever podcast streaming device of your choice. I hope you enjoyed the conversation, and till next time, we'll see you there.